How concerned are you about, like, did you see anything that makes you truly concerned about Michigan, or is it just sort of, hey, this is a hangover with lots of new players and pieces and coaches, etc.?
I'm concerned. I don't think Connor Stallions has anything to do with the fact that they only won by 20 points against Fresno. And we should note Fresno's a pretty solid Mountain West team. They may end up playing for the Mountain West Championship this year. But I think offensively, I think what worries me is, and this is kind of the broader concern for Michigan, five new offensive line starters, taking away a quarterback who was picked in the first round. Colston Loveland caught 8 of the 16 throws on Saturday night. Not necessarily a bad thing, but do they have any receivers who can stretch the field? And until your offensive line and running game kind of finds itself, I think that's going to be a real concern. The other part of this is I was a little surprised that Davis Warren started. And I know from following some of
Yeah.
the camp news, he kind of made some strides later on. But I think Alex Orji, if anything, under him, you kind of had an identity in that it was going to be pound it, much like they did against Penn State, and try to just lean on that until the passing game kind of came in. But there's just a lot of questions right now, like offensive line, receiver, quarterback. And if I think that kind of adds up to their they average 4.4 yards per carry against Fresno, which isn't bad, but some of these other teams, starting with Texas this week, if you can't throw it, I'm not really sure how much that's going to be able to open up your run game. So I'm a little concerned, but also it is the first week of the season with a lot of new. So I think we ought to use a little patience, I guess, with some figuring some of these things out. But good news is we don't have to wait very long because they play
Yeah.
Texas this weekend. So
I was going to say, let's get to the game because Texas and Michigan will play. It's about a 7.5 point spread. Arch Manning got into the game for Texas. Of course, that's the first thing I say about the Longhorns. They looked pretty crisp against Colorado State. The problem, to your point, it wasn't a 20-point win for Michigan. Will Johnson did his best to make that score look a little bit better, but their offense was a concern. What'd you see from? Here's my question about Texas. What'd you see from Texas's defense? The secondary was the concern last year. Then they lost two elite defensive tackles. What did you? I'm not sure how much we can learn, but what did you see from Texas's defense in Week 1 that tells you that they can go on and challenge Michigan up in the Big House on the road in Week 2?
I think they turned in a pretty dominant effort. And of course, there is some opponent adjustment here. Colorado State, I think, is going to be probably one of the sleeper teams in the Mountain West. I like this team all offseason. They held them under 200 yards, also held Torrey Horton, one of the nation's best receivers, to 5 catches for 31 yards. So I think what I take away from that game is, and watching in the second half, this defense has good depth. And I think the pass rush cleaning up some of the things that they gave up on the ground. They gave up about 118 yards to Colorado State. Not bad, but also Colorado State's more of a passing team too. So there are some things they have to get better at. But I think one thing I liked was the depth of this defense. We saw it in the second, third quarter, fourth quarter, pitching the shutout, holding Colorado State, like I said, to under 200 yards. So I think for an opponent that has the firepower, at least in a opener against a pretty good G5 team, they dominate. And I think that's what you want to see going into this game against Michigan on Saturday.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I don't think I learned much about Texas. I think there's a lot of positives to be taken there. The fact that they didn't, stumble on any moments, which is a big step for Texas because they had a couple of those moments last year. I don't think we expected it this week, but we're going to learn a whole lot. I think what's going to be interesting is Ewers against the Michigan defense in a hostile environment. I don't have a lot of confidence that Michigan's offense is all of a sudden going to figure it out this week. I think if they want to win the game, it's going to have to be very low scoring, kind of blue collar, beat each other up and take the under kind of deal. And I think they're capable of playing that type of game. I think that's how they're going to win a lot of games this year at Michigan is with that defense. But I don't have a lot of like. It's about learning what Quinn Ewers really is from an upside standpoint for me. Like I want to see how he handles all that talent on defense and the hostile environment. And if he goes and plays really well, this is sort of like what we learned about Cam Ward and Drew Aller and, Garrett Nussmeier. I thought did a very good job. Georgia looked very good. When challenged, how do you look? How do you handle it? And I think Ewers has a really big opportunity to show the country that he has, in fact, taken another step this weekend. And if that happens, all the preseason narratives about Texas might actually have been true. So
I think if, first of all, from a scouting perspective, if you're looking ahead to the NFL draft, I mean, just think about the matchups that you're going to see in
Yeah.
this game. The Texas offensive line are one of the best in the country against Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, this outstanding Michigan defensive front. Will Johnson against one of the Texas receivers. That was another takeaway that I had on Saturday for Texas was the new weapons. And we'll find out more in a tougher environment this week. But Isaiah Bond, Ryan Wingo, Matthew Golden, they all showed up at receiver. Looked like the passing game was pretty crisp for all the new pieces at receiver. And of course, they got some other running backs in the game, which is key because, obviously they lost CJ Baxter, who was supposed to be their starter. But, all in all, I think just the way this game is going to be had to be played is, I think if you're Texas, if you jump on Michigan early, you're in the driver's seat because I don't know that Michigan has the
Yeah.
firepower right now to come back. I think Michigan wants to turn this game into like a 17-13 kind of game and say,
Yep.
we can run the ball and we can lean on our defense. And I think if you're Texas, if you don't turn the ball over and make Michigan try to stretch themselves on offense, this game really plays into Texas' hands. This spread actually jumped up a little bit. I think it was 6.5, and now it's almost a touchdown. I think 7 now.
Seven and a
So
half. Yeah.
not surprised. I
Although,
think a lot of people
although,
jumping on it after what they saw from Michigan.
yeah, and we'll get to our picks against the spread in just a minute, but I think, yeah, by the way, did you see Isaiah Bond have to fix his helmet like mid route and then caught a touchdown? That was a
Yeah,
spectacular. That was a spectacular play. I appreciated that. Here's my question: do you think Michigan makes any changes at quarterback, like maybe in the middle of the game? Do you think like, and again, if you don't know the backstory on Warren, it's a really incredible story to get where he is today, to have overcome cancer and the whole deal. But what do you think there's a quick hook here? I mean, the offense did not look particularly good, and to your point, it was a bit of a surprise that he got the start.
I think both will play. I think that's the key. I think you got to have both if you're
Yeah, yeah,
Michigan, because I think like we saw last week, Colorado State ran for over 100 yards. Is that noise? Is the Texas rush defense more vulnerable? I think we'll find out. And one way to find out is get Alex Orji in a quarterback and let him power the defense. So yeah, both will play on Saturday, I'm sure.
yep. There you have it. All right, so I'm taking. It sounds like we're both taking Texas, but that keep an eye on Michigan if it's low scoring. I think they play better than they did last week. I think they're all motivated for this one. So easy to overlook Fresno State late start. Late start time in Ann Arbor, hangover, new coaches, new everything on offense. It can be it's understandable why they played that way. But you need to see a step and some progress this week on offense in particular if you're a Michigan fan. Otherwise, hook 'em, I guess.
I like Texas win too.
Yeah, I do too.